A grand carriage rolls through the unforgiving mountains, a defiant intrusion into Silas's wild domain. "Silas, I'm back," a woman's voice echoes, cutting through 20 years of silence. He raises his rifle, seeing only a threat, but then she shows a small carved detail. His entire world now hangs in the balance as this millionaire reveals her impossible plan. Above the tree line, where the wind carved sculptures from ancient rock and the air itself tasted of ice and pine, Silas made his home. It was a dwelling born of raw timber and stone, a sturdy defiance against the elements, perched like an eagle's nest overlooking a world he had long forsaken. For the few who ventured into these unforgiving heights, Silas was less a man and more a legend, a creature of myth cloaked in buckskin and silence. The whispers in Redemption Creek, a distant echo of human folly, spoke of his solitary existence, of a man who found kinship with the wild, conversing with the hawks circling overhead rather than with the settlers toiling in the valley. His days unfolded with a primal rhythm, dictated by the sun's arc and the changing seasons. Before dawn painted the eastern peaks with hues of fire and rose, Silas was already awake. The scent of wood smoke mingled with the crisp, clean breath of the pre-dawn air as he tended his hearth, the only source of warmth in the cabin's stoic heart. His hands, gnarled and strong, moved with a practiced economy as he chopped firewood, each swing of the axe a clean, resonant thud that echoed through the profound silence of the alpine forest. It was a sound that spoke of sustenance, of survival, a heartbeat against the vast, indifferent wilderness. He was a relic, a living testament to a bygone era, when a man's worth was measured by his endurance, his integrity, and his ability to coax life from the unforgiving land. The world below, with its burgeoning towns and the relentless iron serpent of the railway, held no appeal. He had turned his back on its empty promises and its hollow pursuits, finding a brutal yet honest truth in the stark beauty of perpetual snow and the unyielding strength of rock. Here, amidst the towering sentinels of the granite mountains, he found a freedom that civilization could never offer, a peace forged in solitude and self-reliance. He understood the language of the rustling aspens, the warning cries of a distant elk, and the silent patience of a predator stalking its prey. This was his sanctuary, his prison, and his kingdom all at once. Yet even in his steadfast resolve, a shadow lingered, a quiet question that surfaced sometimes in the still hours of the night, or while watching a lone eagle soar. He had rescued Eliza from the jaws of a merciless winter, nurtured her fragile life back from the brink, only to return her to a world he despised, a world of noise and greed. He had believed it was the right path, the only path, for a child who deserved more than the harsh isolation he offered. He had wondered in moments of quiet reflection if her spirit, once so bright and resilient in the face of despair, had been crushed by the very forces he had fled. He convinced himself that she had adapted, or perhaps simply vanished into the great consuming maw of progress, just as his own way of life was slowly but surely fading into legend. He watched from his lonely perch as the valley below continued its relentless transformation, scars of industry marring the pristine landscape. The railroad, a testament to man's insatiable ambition, crept ever closer, its distant whistle a mournful dirge for the wilderness he revered. He believed his destiny was to disappear alongside the wolves and the wild places, to become a forgotten whisper in the wind. But the mountains held secrets deeper than ancient stone, and fate, cunning weaver, had already begun to spin a new thread, invisible to even the keenest eye. The fragile peace he had built, a fortress of solitude, was about to be challenged, not by the expected encroaching world, but by the unexpected return of a ghost from his past, carrying a truth that would shake the very foundations of his desolate existence. 20 years before, when the mountains had truly bared their teeth, unleashing a winter of such ferocity that even the seasoned trappers huddled in their cabins, Silas had ventured into the howling maelstrom. It was a trek born not of choice, but of dire necessity, his larder running dangerously low. The snow, thick and unforgiving, muffled all sound, transforming the familiar landscape into a featureless canvas of white, where death lurked in every drift. He moved like a ghost, his snowshoes whispering across the pristine surface, his breath pluming in the frigid air, the raw cold biting at exposed skin. His path led him through Devil's Gorge, a treacherous cleft in the mountains known for its swirling winds and sudden, deadly avalanches. Even in summer, it was a place of ill omen, but in winter, it became a tomb. As he neared the narrowest point, a faint, unnatural disturbance in the snow caught his eye. A dark smear against the blinding white, a shape that did not belong to nature. His hand instinctively went to the rifle slung across his back, its cold metal a familiar comfort. Every fiber of his being, honed by years of solitary survival, screamed a warning. What he found was a scene of utter desolation, a testament to man's cruelty or nature's indifference, or perhaps a dreadful combination of both. The wreckage of a caravan lay scattered, splintered wood and torn canvas peeking from under fresh snow. The air, already sharp with ice, now carried a faint, coppery tang that spoke of spilled blood, mingled with the acrid scent of burned wood. Horses lay frozen in grotesque poses, their eyes wide with a terror that even death could not erase. It was a tableau of tragedy, a brutal punctuation mark in the wilderness's endless sentence. Silas, usually stoic, felt a chill that transcended the biting cold. He moved cautiously, his gaze scanning the silent scene, his senses alert to any lingering threat. There was an eerie stillness, a silence deeper than the mountain's usual hush, broken only by the relentless shriek of the wind. He examined the bodies, men and women, contorted in their final struggles. Their wounds, some crude and deep, others indicative of a more deliberate, savage intent, told a story that chilled him far more than the freezing air. It was not merely the cold that had claimed them. A glint of polished metal in the snow, a finely crafted button, seemed out of place amidst the rough attire of the travelers, hinting at a presence less rustic, more organized than common bandits. This was no random act of nature or simple robbery. It felt like a calculated, brutal purge. Just as he was about to turn away, his heart heavy with the grim futility of it all, a faint, almost imperceptible whimper reached him, a sound barely louder than the wind's lament. It was a thread of life, fragile yet defiant, against the vast tapestry of death. He froze, then moved with renewed purpose, following the sound to an overturned wagon, half buried in a drift. Tucked beneath a canvas flap, shielded by the bodies of what must have been her parents, lay a child. A girl, no older than 8, her small frame shivering uncontrollably, her eyes wide, reflecting the stark, unforgiving world around her. Terror had frozen her tears, leaving her face a mask of silent anguish. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Silas. His life was one of solitude, a deliberate choice. He was a creature of the wild, unsuited for the softness of human companionship, especially that of a child. His cabin, a fortress against the world, was a sanctuary for one, not two. Yet the sight of her, so utterly vulnerable, so utterly alone, ignited something primal within him, a spark of protection he hadn't known he possessed. He saw not a burden, but a fragile flicker of life that defied the overwhelming darkness, a challenge to the indifference of the wilderness he knew so well. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his bones, that to leave her was to condemn her to the same fate as the others. Without another thought, his own survival instincts momentarily overridden by a more profound, ancient imperative, Silas carefully extricated the girl. Her small body was stiff with cold, her skin marble pale, but a faint warmth still lingered. He wrapped her in his own thick fur cloak, cradling her close against his chest, her small head resting beneath his chin. The faint scent of her child's hair, mixed with the harsh tang of the wilderness, filled his senses. He looked back at the ravaged caravan, the silent dead, the chilling evidence of unnatural violence, and then at the fragile life he now held. The wind seemed to howl a warning, a prophecy of the immense burden he had just taken upon himself. He turned his back on the gorge, on the silent witnesses of tragedy. and began the long, arduous trek back to his solitary refuge, his world irrevocably altered by the small, shivering bundle in his arms. His journey into isolation had ended, replaced by an unforeseen path of guardianship and the profound, terrifying responsibility of another's fragile hope. The journey back to his cabin was a relentless battle against the elements and the growing dread in Silas's heart. The snow intensified, whipped into a blinding frenzy by the gale-force winds. Each step a monumental effort. He felt the child's small body tremble against him, a constant reminder of the fragile life he now carried. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, heavy as the drifts, but the primal instinct to protect, once awakened, could not be quelled. Hours later, as twilight bled into the deep indigo of a mountain night, the dark silhouette of his cabin emerged from the swirling snow, a beacon of rough-hewn sanctuary. Smoke, thin and steady, curled from its stone chimney, a testament to the enduring fire within. He pushed open the heavy, snow-laden door, the sudden warmth and the scent of pine and wood smoke a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Inside, the single room was Spartan, yet meticulously ordered. A rough-hewn table, a single chair, a sturdy cot draped with thick furs, and the ever-present roaring stone fireplace that was the heart of his existence. Silas gently laid the girl on his cot, her small form almost swallowed by the heavy furs. He quickly stoked the fire, its flames leaping higher, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Her breathing was shallow, her skin as cold as the ice she had endured. He worked with a quiet efficiency born of necessity, boiling water, preparing a poultice of herbs, and carefully peeling away her frozen, tattered clothes. Her body was a canvas of bruises and cuts, testaments to the violence and exposure she had suffered. He spoke to her in low, guttural tones. Words meant more to soothe his own raw nerves than to be understood by the child. He was accustomed to the silence of the mountains, to the language of rustling leaves and cracking ice. Now, the soft whimpers and shallow breaths of a child filled his solitary world, a dissonant chord in his carefully composed existence. He cleaned her wounds, his touch surprisingly gentle for hands accustomed to felling trees and skinning game. He fed her sips of warm, weak broth, watching with an intense focus as she struggled to swallow. Days bled into nights as Silas became her silent, watchful guardian. He hunted only what was necessary, never straying far from the cabin, constantly alert to her every cough, every shivering breath. The girl, whom he learned was named Eliza, remained largely unresponsive, her eyes wide and haunted, reflecting the trauma she had endured. She rarely spoke, her voice a small, raspy whisper when it came, a stark contrast to the lively chatter he imagined a child her age might possess. He was a creature of routine, of solitary purpose, and her presence was a profound disruption, challenging every ingrained habit of his reclusive life. He found himself, for the first time in decades, considering another's needs before his own. He caught himself humming a low, wordless tune as he chopped wood, a habit long forgotten. He made a small, crude deer amulet from a piece of antler, carving it with hands more accustomed to axe and rifle, presenting it to her without a word. She clutched it to her chest, a silent acknowledgement, the first glimmer of a connection between them. It was a fragile bridge, built not of words, but of unspoken understanding and shared vulnerability. As the worst of winter began to recede, giving way to the first hesitant breath of spring, a stark reality began to dawn on Silas. He had saved her body, but his solitary existence could not mend her spirit, nor could he offer her the life a child deserved. He knew deep in his heart that she needed more than survival. She needed a community, a future that extended beyond the lonely reaches of his mountain home. The decision was not his to make alone. Her future lay beyond his self-imposed boundaries. He had protected her, healed her, but he could not keep her. One clear, cold morning, as the first rays of the sun gilded the snow-capped peaks, Silas brought Eliza to the edge of his territory, a natural boundary marked by an ancient stand of sentinel pines. He knelt before her, his rough hands resting on her small shoulders. His gaze, usually so fierce, held a sorrowful tenderness. He spoke, his voice gruff, yet imbued with a profound weight. He could not keep her, not truly. He was a mountain man, not a father. His cabin was a sanctuary from the world, not a place to raise a child within it. She deserved a chance at a different life, a life away from the shadows of the gorge and the silence of his solitude. He would take her to Redemption Creek, the fledgling outpost nestled at the foot of the mountains, a place he usually avoided with the fervor of a man fleeing a plague. There, he hoped, she would find a future, a true home. He offered not comfort, but a release, a chance to escape the harsh wilderness and reclaim a piece of her lost childhood, even as it tore a silent, unseen wound in his own guarded heart. The journey down the mountain, carrying Eliza, was a different kind of arduous. It was less a physical trial and more an emotional one for Silas. Each step away from his solitary sanctuary felt like a betrayal of his chosen path, yet each glance at the small, solemn face nestled against his shoulder reaffirmed the necessity of his decision. He moved with a grim determination, ignoring the ache in his muscles and the growing knot of unease in his gut. As they descended, the landscape slowly transformed. The stark, silent world of ice and rock gave way to whispering pine forests, then to the more gentle rolling foothills. The air grew softer, carrying the faint, distant scent of wood smoke from many hearths, a human smell that Silas found both alien and unsettling. The sounds of the wild, once his sole companions, were gradually replaced by the faint, muffled hum of distant activity, the distant bark of a dog, the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Finally, Redemption Creek emerged from the trees, a small, bustling outpost clinging to the edge of civilization. It was a chaotic symphony of human endeavor, the creak of wagon wheels, the shouts of merchants, the lowing of cattle, and the constant murmur of voices. To Silas it was an assault on his senses, a cacophony that grated against his mountain-honed ears. He felt like a wolf venturing into a den of foxes, wary and out of place. He approached the town's edge, keeping to the shadows of the forest, observing the unfamiliar faces. He sought out the small, rough-hewn church, a place he knew would offer refuge and perhaps answers for a lost child. As he neared, he saw the stern yet kind face of Pastor Elias, a man known for his unwavering faith and his efforts to bring some semblance of order to the wild outpost. Silas, unaccustomed to plea or supplication, presented Eliza to the pastor. He spoke few words, his voice gruff and laconic, describing only the bare facts of her discovery, the ravaged caravan, the brutal winter, and her miraculous survival. He omitted the gruesome details of the massacre, sensing that the child had endured enough. He merely stated that she was found alone, unharmed save for the cold, and that she needed a home, a proper upbringing. Pastor Elias, a man who had seen much hardship in his time, recognized the silent plea in the mountain man's eyes, the profound burden he was trying to shed, not out of indifference, but out of a deeper understanding of his own limitations. Eliza, quiet and watchful, clung to Silas's hand, her small fingers surprisingly strong. She was no longer the shivering, unresponsive child he had found. The warmth of his cabin, the simple sustenance, and the silent, steadfast presence of Silas had rekindled a spark within her. Her eyes, though still shadowed, now held a glimmer of their former light. She looked from the pastor to Silas, a silent question in her gaze, a child's unspoken fear of abandonment. Silas felt an unexpected pang as he released her hand, the warmth of her small palm lingering in his own. He watched as Pastor Elias knelt, speaking softly to Eliza, his voice gentle and reassuring. The community of Redemption Creek, though rough-hewn and opportunistic, had a heart for orphans, for those cast adrift by the brutal realities of the frontier. They welcomed her, offering shelter and the promise of a future, a stark contrast to the solitary, demanding existence Silas offered. As the pastor led Eliza away, a small bundle of clothing in his arms, she turned, her eyes finding Silas's across the bustling street. For a brief, poignant moment, their gazes locked. He saw in her eyes not just a child's gratitude, but a profound understanding, an acknowledgement of the debt she carried and perhaps a silent promise. She was no longer just the fragile survivor of a winter's tragedy. She was Eliza, a child of resilience, forged in the crucible of loss and saved by the silent strength of the mountain. Silas turned and melted back into the shadows of the forest, the unfamiliar sounds of the town fading behind him. His mission was complete, his burden lifted, yet a new, hollow ache had taken its place. He had returned her to the world, but in doing so, he had created an empty space within his own. He knew, with a certainty that was both comforting and unsettling, that the silence of his cabin would feel deeper, colder, and far more profound than it ever had before. The act of saving Eliza had changed him, not in ways he could immediately articulate, but in a subtle, undeniable shift that had softened the edges of his hardened heart, leaving an echo of a child's laughter in his solitary world, a reminder of the fleeting connection that had broken through his fierce isolation. 20 years stretched out like an endless plain between Silas and the memory of Eliza. A chasm widened by the relentless march of time. He retreated deeper into the mountains, seeking a solitude more absolute, a silence that would drown out the faint echoes of the child he had once protected. He carved his existence with an even sharper edge, honing his survival skills to an almost mythical degree. The seasons turned, bringing harsh winters and fleeting summers, each one etching deeper lines on his face and further hardening his resolve. From his vantage point high above, Silas watched Redemption Creek transform. The fledgling outpost blossomed into a bustling town, a testament to human ambition and the allure of progress. The railroad, once a distant promise, became a roaring reality, its iron tracks scarring the ancient land, its smoky breath polluting the crisp mountain air. Lumber barons arrived, their axes felling ancient trees with a casual brutality that made Silas's blood run cold. Miners burrowed into the earth, their insatiable hunger for ore leaving gaping wounds in the very body of the mountain. He saw the faces of the new arrivals, driven by greed and a relentless pursuit of wealth. He observed the townsfolk, once a community clinging precariously to the edge of the wild, now consumed by the clamor of commerce. He assumed Eliza, if she had survived, had been swallowed by this new world, transformed into one of its cogs, her gentle spirit hardened by its demands. He believed she had forgotten the silent mountain man, just as the world had largely forgotten him. He accepted his fate, envisioning himself as the last of a dying breed, destined to vanish alongside the pristine wilderness he so fiercely guarded. His days were a stark testament to endurance. He hunted with a skill bordering on reverence, taking only what he needed, his senses attuned to every whisper of the forest. He trapped with cunning and patience, his furs a silent currency for the few supplies he reluctantly acquired from the lower settlements, always at the fringes, always avoiding the probing gazes of the townsfolk. His cabin, once a simple shelter, grew into a fortress of self-reliance, each log a testament to his strength, each stone hearth a symbol of his unwavering independence. He carried the weight of the mountain's wildness within him, a silent vow to protect what remained of its untamed spirit. One autumn, an especially harsh one that painted the aspens in hues of violent gold, Silas noticed a change in the valley. The usual rumblings of industry intensified, but a new kind of activity began to unfold. Surveyors, men in crisp suits with maps and instruments, began to appear at the fringes of the mountain's lower slopes, their presence a stark desecration of the natural order. Whispers of vast land deals, of mining claims that stretched up into the higher reaches, began to filter through the sparse network of trappers and prospectors who occasionally ventured close enough to his domain. Silas, ever watchful, felt a cold dread coil in his gut. This was different from the usual encroachment. This was an organized, systematic assault, an ambition that threatened not just a portion, but the very heart of his mountain sanctuary. He saw the glint of ambition in the eyes of the men who rode out from Redemption Creek, their greed a tangible force. He knew what they sought, the raw materials, the untouched forests, the veins of ore hidden deep within the ancient rock. They saw a resource, He saw a living, breathing entity. His resolve hardened into something akin to granite. He would not allow it. His mountain, his home, his life's solitary purpose would not be devoured by their insatiable hunger. He began to prepare, sharpening his axe, cleaning his rifle, laying out his traps with renewed purpose. He was ready to fight, a single man against the tide of progress, a lone wolf guarding his territory. He knew the terrain, the hidden paths, the treacherous ledges. He was the mountain's guardian, and he would defend it with every fiber of his being. The challenge was immense, the odds impossible, but Silas had long ago ceased to care for odds. He cared only for the wild, and for the unspoken vow he had made to it. He stood on the precipice of a final, desperate stand, unaware that the true turning point, the unlikely salvation, would not come from his own strength, but from the most unexpected of sources. The past, he believed, had long since faded into oblivion. The whispers began in Redemption Creek, spreading like wildfire through the saloons and general stores, carried on the breath of awe and disbelief. A luxurious carriage, an absurd confection of polished mahogany and velvet upholstery had arrived. It was an anomaly in the dusty, rough-hewn town, a stark emblem of Eastern wealth that drew every eye. From within its opulent confines emerged a woman, a figure of striking elegance and undeniable power. This was Eliza Vance, a name whispered with a mixture of envy and respect. Her vast fortune from the eastern cities already the subject of frontier legends. She was not the small, haunted child Silas had known. This woman, with her composed posture and intelligent, piercing gaze, commanded immediate attention. She moved with an aura of quiet authority, her silken skirts rustling softly as she surveyed the town that had once been her fragile sanctuary. The town's prominent figures, the saloon owners, the ambitious merchants, and the newly arrived land agents all vied for her attention, eager to impress, to curry favor. Yet she dismissed their overtures with a polite but firm resolve, her purpose clearly defined and entirely her own. She asked for a single name, a name that silenced the bustling street, a name that echoed with the untamed spirit of the mountains. Silas. The townsfolk exchanged bewildered glances. Silas, the reclusive mountain man, was an enigma, a figure of folklore. What could such a woman want with him? The question hung in the air, thick with speculation and gossip. Eliza, however, offered no explanations. Her focus was singular, her resolve unshakable. She procured a sturdy pack horse and a guide, ignoring the warnings of the mountain's dangers and Silas's legendary hostility towards outsiders. She was prepared for the arduous climb, her determination forged in a crucible of loss and survival that none in the valley could comprehend. Her ascent into the higher reaches was a physical challenge, a grueling test of endurance. The air grew thinner, the trails steeper, the silence more profound. She pressed on, driven by a purpose deeper than mere curiosity. The familiar scent of pine and crisp mountain air, a smell she had long forgotten, stirred a dormant memory within her, a faint echo of warmth and safety in a brutal world. Each step brought her closer not just to Silas, but to a part of herself she believed she had lost forever. When she finally reached the clearing above the tree line, the site of the cabin was as she remembered it, rugged, defiant, an extension of the very mountain itself. Silas stood before it, a silhouette against the vast expanse of rock and sky, his rifle held with an almost casual readiness. His face, etched with the passage of time, was a mask of suspicion. He saw only another encroacher from the civilization he despised, another symbol of the world's relentless ambition. His gaze held no recognition, only the hardened vigilance of a creature protecting its last refuge. Eliza approached cautiously, her heart thrumming with a mixture of apprehension and hope. She spoke his name, her voice clear and strong, yet imbued with a profound reverence. He remained unmoving, his eyes narrowed, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. It was then that she reached into her satchel, producing a small, weather-worn object. It was the crude deer amulet, carved from antler, its edges softened by time and constant touch, a silent testament to a forgotten act of kindness. Silas's eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on the amulet. A flicker of something, a spark of memory, ignited in their depths, momentarily breaking through his formidable defenses. His grip on the rifle slackened almost imperceptibly. He remembered the feel of the antler against his rough hands, the painstaking effort to carve such a small, delicate thing for a child. He remembered the silent, tear-streaked face, the eyes that mirrored the terror of the wilderness. The woman before him, poised and powerful, began to dissolve, revealing the ghost of a small, frightened girl. He remembered Eliza. The recognition was a profound shock, a tremor that ran through his solitary world. His mind, accustomed to the unchanging rhythm of the mountain, reeled at the sheer impossibility of it all. He had believed her lost, absorbed by the currents of the world below. Now, she stood before him, not as a victim, but as a force. She did not offer him charity or a place in her opulent life. Instead, she spoke with a quiet certainty, her voice resonating with the truth of their shared past. She spoke not of wealth or power, but of the invaluable lesson he had imparted during those dark winter days, the enduring strength of resilience, the raw, honest truth of survival forged in the heart of the mountain. It was the only lesson, she explained, that had truly mattered, the foundation upon which her own formidable life had been built. The moment of recognition hung heavy in the mountain air, a fragile bridge between two vastly different lives. Silas, whose existence was defined by solitude, found his carefully constructed world irrevocably altered by the sight of the woman who had once been the small, shivering girl in his arms. The dear amulet, a crude symbol of his past kindness, had shattered the wall of his reclusion. He lowered his rifle, the gesture speaking volumes of a trust slowly, tentatively extended. Eliza, now a woman of immense composure and influence, did not mince words. She spoke of her journey, of the fortune she had amassed in the bustling East, a fortune built upon the very resilience he had unknowingly instilled in her during those brutal winter weeks. She spoke of the lessons of the mountain, the unforgiving nature of the wild, the absolute necessity of self-reliance, and the profound strength found in silent endurance. These were not mere platitudes. They were the cornerstones of her success, the guiding principles that had allowed her to navigate the cutthroat world of commerce. She had returned not to repay a debt in coin, nor to offer him a comfortable retirement in the valley, an idea Silas would have scorned with the ferocity of a trapped wolf. Her purpose was far grander, far more profound. With a quiet gravity, she revealed the true extent of her intention, a revelation that would stun not only Silas, but the entire valley below. She had purchased the mountain, not a parcel, not a claim, but the entire expanse of wilderness that formed Silas's world. Her words hung in the crisp air, unbelievable, yet undeniably real. She unfurled legal documents, crisp and official, bearing seals and signatures, the undeniable proof of her immense power. The ink on the parchment spoke a language the lumber barons and railroad magnates understood far too well, a language of ownership, of undisputed dominion. The lands he had roamed, protected, and called his own for decades now belonged legally to her. Silas, for all his strength and independence, felt a tremor of disbelief. His home, his sanctuary, his very way of life had been under assault from the encroaching world, threatened by the relentless hunger of industry. He had braced himself for a bitter, losing battle, a desperate stand against an inevitable tide. Now this woman, this ghost from his past, had, with a stroke of a pen and the deployment of vast wealth, accomplished what he could never have dreamed. She had not come to exploit or to build a lavish estate. Her purpose was preservation. With the legal might of her fortune, Eliza declared the lands of Silas, the mountain man who had saved her, a protected sanctuary. It would be a preserve, a haven where the ancient forests, the pristine waters, and the wild creatures would remain untouched by the relentless hand of man. No lumber company could fell its trees, no miner could scar its earth, no railway could violate its sacred silence. The mountain man, who had pulled a small, terrified child from the jaws of a merciless winter, now found his own wild world saved by the woman civilization had shaped. The irony was profound, a twist of fate only the mountains themselves could have orchestrated. Silas, who had never expected anything from the world below, received the one thing money should never be able to buy: the absolute assurance that his home, his way of life, and the very spirit of the wild he cherished would never be destroyed. As Eliza spoke of her plans, of ecological preservation and the creation of a trust to ensure the mountain's enduring protection, Silas looked at her with a depth of understanding that transcended words. He saw not just the powerful millionaire, but the resilient child who had endured the unendurable. He realized that the amulet, a simple token of his care, had not merely reminded her of her rescuer, but of the values he embodied, values she had carried into a world that often forgot them. Her act was not one of charity, but of profound gratitude, a testament to the enduring power of a single act of kindness, echoing across 2 decades and transforming 2 lives. The threat of encroachment, which had loomed so large, now receded, replaced by an unexpected calm, a sense of profound, hard-won peace that settled over the ancient peaks. The news rippled through Redemption Creek like a shockwave, leaving in its wake a tumultuous mixture of disbelief, outrage, and grudging respect. Eliza Vance, the Eastern millionaire, had not merely bought land. She had bought the entire mountain, declaring it a protected sanctuary. For the lumber barons, whose saws had been poised to devour ancient forests, and for the mining magnates whose picks hungered for the veins of ore, it was a bitter, unthinkable defeat. Their carefully laid plans, their investments, their dreams of untold wealth, had dissolved into thin air. The air in the saloons of Redemption Creek was thick with the growl of frustrated men. Arguments erupted, threats were muttered, and names were cursed, none more often than Eliza Vance's, and to a lesser extent Silas's. These men, accustomed to bending the wilderness to their will, found themselves thwarted by a woman's singular vision and immeasurable wealth. They tried legal challenges, sending their lawyers to pore over documents, searching for loopholes, for any flaw in Eliza's impenetrable claim. But her foresight was absolute. Her legal team had crafted an ironclad case, anticipating every challenge, sealing every potential weakness. The mountain was hers, and by extension, protected. Silas watched these events unfold from his high perch, a quiet observer of the human storm below. He saw the fury, the resentment, the desperate attempts to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. But he also saw the futility of their efforts. Eliza had fought a different kind of battle, one with parchment and pens, with legal acumen and unwavering determination, and she had won decisively. She had used the very tools of civilization against its destructive impulses, turning its own power back upon itself. The mountain, once a target for exploitation, became a symbol of defiance. Its untamed beauty, once seen as a resource to be harvested, was now viewed through a new lens, one of preservation and reverence. The railroad, which had once been poised to carve new scars into its slopes, now respected an invisible boundary, its tracks veering away, leaving the inner sanctum of the wilderness untouched. For Eliza, the victory was more than legal. It was deeply personal. She returned to the cabin often, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a kindred spirit. She brought supplies, not as charity, but as offerings of partnership. She shared meals with Silas, her elegant attire a stark contrast to his buckskins, yet their conversations were seamless, transcending the superficial differences of their worlds. They spoke of the mountain, of its flora and fauna, of the delicate balance of its ecosystem. She learned from his deep intuitive knowledge of the land, and he, in turn, began to understand the complexities of the world she had mastered. Their bond deepened, forged not by romantic overtures, but by a shared purpose and a profound mutual respect. They were 2 pariahs, each in their own way, who had found a common ground. Silas, the recluse, began to shed some of his hardened edges, his silence softening into comfortable companionship. Eliza, the millionaire, found a peace in the raw honesty of the mountain that her wealth could never buy, a quiet solace far removed from the demands of her opulent life. She saw in Silas not just her rescuer, but a living embodiment of the strength and integrity she admired. He saw in her not just a powerful woman, but the resilient child whose spirit had blossomed despite unimaginable loss. One crisp autumn evening, as the first snowflakes began to dance in the twilight, a small group of hunters, emboldened by drink and a lingering resentment over the protected lands, ventured too close to Silas's cabin, intent on a confrontation. They carried rifles, their faces grim and menacing, their voices loud and threatening. They sought to intimidate, to reclaim a sense of dominion over the land they believed was unjustly taken from them. Silas, ever vigilant, was ready. He stood before his cabin, his own rifle a silent promise of defense. But before the confrontation could escalate, before any shots were fired, Eliza stepped forward, emerging from the shadows of the cabin. Her presence was unexpected, her composure absolute. She did not raise her voice, but her words, delivered with quiet authority, cut through the bluster and aggression of the men. She reminded them, not of legal documents, but of the unyielding spirit of the mountain and of the consequences of disturbing its peace. She spoke of the law, yes, but also of a deeper, unspoken respect for nature, a concept alien to their greed. The men, surprised and disarmed by her unwavering resolve, and perhaps sensing a moral authority that transcended their petty grievances, slowly backed away. The confrontation diffused not through violence, but through the unexpected power of a woman's quiet strength and an unspoken understanding of the enduring will of the mountain. It was a victory not of force, but of wisdom, and a profound testament to the protective alliance forged between the mountain man and the woman he had saved. A year passed, bringing with it a profound, quiet transformation to the granite mountains and to the lives nestled within their rugged embrace. The whispers of resentment from Redemption Creek eventually faded, replaced by a grudging acceptance of the mountain's new status. Eliza Vance, the millionaire who had bought the wild, continued her work, establishing rangers to patrol the boundaries and foundations to ensure its eternal protection. The scars of potential exploitation began to heal, the forest reclaiming its ancient dominion, the wildlife thriving in the sanctuary that had been created. And in Silas's cabin, a different kind of sanctuary blossomed. The single room, once a stark testament to solitude, now hummed with a quiet warmth and the gentle rhythm of two lives intertwined. The rough-hewn table, once set for one, now bore the marks of shared meals. The silence, once absolute, was now punctuated by the soft crackle of the fire, the contented sigh of Eliza, and the rustle of turning pages as she read aloud by the flickering lamplight. Silas, the mountain man, was no longer truly alone. Eliza had not merely purchased the land. She had, in a profound and unspoken way, adopted his life, weaving herself into the fabric of his existence. Their bond was not one of conventional romance, but something deeper, more elemental, a partnership forged in shared adversity and a mutual reverence for the wild. She brought not just her wealth, but her quiet strength, her keen intellect, and a profound capacity for care that had been honed by her own journey. She transformed the cabin from a place of survival into a true home, filling it with the quiet warmth of companionship. One blustery autumn afternoon, as the first flakes of snow danced outside the window, Eliza sat by the hearth, her frame softened, her face radiant with a new, profound peace. Her hand rested gently over her visibly rounded abdomen, a silent testament to the blossoming of new life within her. The mountain, which had once nurtured her back from the brink of death, was now nurturing another life through her. Silas watched her, his usually stoic face softened by an emotion he rarely allowed to surface. The fiercely independent recluse who had once protected a lost child was now preparing to welcome a child of his own, a symbol of the complete healing and the astonishing new legacy they were building together. Their story, whispered from Redemption Creek to the distant logging camps, began to take on the quality of a legend. The millionaire who bought the mountain man who saved her, and the unlikely home they built in the wild. But the true story, The deeper truth lay not in the grand gestures or the vast fortune, but in the quiet acts of resilience and the profound discovery that family was not solely a matter of blood, but of fierce protection, mutual healing, and the deliberate choice to build a home, even in the most unforgiving of landscapes. Years later, the child, a boy with Eliza's keen eyes and Silas's quiet strength, would roam the protected peaks, learning the secrets of the forest from his mountain father and the wisdom of the world from his mother. He would carry within him the legacy of two pariahs who had found each other, creating a sanctuary where none was expected. The mountain, once a silent witness to tragedy and solitude, now stood as a living testament to an enduring love, a testament to the fact that courage is found not just in grand battles, but in the quiet, steadfast act of choosing connection. Home, they had learned, was not a place defined by four walls or a legal deed, but a feeling of belonging, a profound sense of peace and security found in the shared journey of two souls against the wild, forever bound by the silent, powerful heart of the mountain. Did you enjoy this journey? Tell us from what corner of the world you're watching this story from. Leave your comment, and to make sure you don't miss the next adventure, subscribe to the channel.